Hi everyone, my name is Austin, and we're in another new year, 2025. We're almost halfway through this decade, and well, it started out rough, and depending on how things go, it could get better, or it could get worse. Well, on the offhand chance it gets worse, you don't have to worry. I'll still be here giving you your retro movie fix, as well as talking about TV shows, because, well, that's what I tend to do on this show. That's what I do here. That's what Ace likes to promote, and well, I can't argue with the man. And so to start off this brand new year, let's start with a movie, because generally I would start with a TV show, but those usually don't come out until February, even though I tend to for a release in January, but time and constraints and whatnot. Either way, let's start with a movie to shake things up. And we're going to talk about The Dirty Dozen. Directed by Robert Aldrich, starring Lee Marvin. I'm going to read the rest of these off here. Ernest Borgnine, Charles Bronson, Jim Brown, John Cassavetes, Richard Yeakel, George Kennedy, Trini Lopez, Ralph Meeker, Robert Ryan, Telly Savalas, Clint Walker, and Robert Webber. So, without further ado, let's talk about it. Based on the novel by E.M. Nathanson, the plot of The Dirty Dozen is a lot like this. Set during World War II in March of 1944, OSS officer Major John Reisman is ordered by the commander of ADSEC in Britain, Major General Sam Wharton, to participate in Project Annecy, which is a top-secret operation to train and convert some of the U.S. Army's worst convicts into highly skilled commandos in order to take Wehrmacht officers out of the picture at a chateau near Rennes, which would trigger a disruption of Germany's chain of command in northern France just before D-Day can commence. And as a prize for any of the inmates who make it out alive, they will be pardoned for their crimes and allowed to be a part of the civilized world again. Unless you look like Ernst Stavro Blofeld, in that case you would most likely go back to prison regardless. These prisoners consist of Samson Posey, a gentle giant and haze-induced prisoner awaiting his death sentence, Vernon L. Pinkley, a rather slow individual facing 30 years in prison, Robert T. Jefferson, an African-American soldier awaiting the death penalty, Glenn Gilpin, who is to serve 30 years of hard labor, Roscoe Lever, who awaits a 20-year prison sentence, Milo Vladik, who faces 30 years of hard labor, Seth K. Sawyer, who faces 20 years of hard labor, Archer J. Maggot, a psychotic rapist and murderer who definitely is getting the death penalty for his sins against humanity, Joseph Wadislaw, a former major who attacked his superior after refusing to follow an order, who faces a death sentence, Pedro Jimenez, who gets 20 years of hard labor, Victor R. Franco, a robber associated with a mob who awaits death, and Passos R. Bravos, who is to receive 20 years hard labor. And as you can tell, while Gilpin, Pinkley, Sawyer, Lever, Bravos, Vladik, and Jimenez are facing imprisonment and or hard labor for beating someone up, committing larceny, mugging, and impersonation, Franco, Wadislaw, Jefferson, Posey, and of course, Maggot all face the death penalty for something a lot more severe, meaning these aren't exactly shining rays of sunshine here, and at least Maggot shouldn't even be considered for a pardon. Through Reisman, he whips the Dirty Dozen into shape to make the mission a reality. And what follows are scenes as exciting as the next, with the action revving up to an epic conclusion. Yeah, that's the plot. Simple and straight to the point. And if you're familiar with the Suicide Squad, you probably already know the setup and how this is going to work. Because this was one of the things that originated this idea of taking a bunch of crooks and turning them loose on your enemies. I like it. Now, let's talk about the production. The production for The Dirty Dozen started like so. As director Robert Aldrich, who directed Kiss Me Deadly, The Big Knife, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, The Flight of the Phoenix, and The Longest Yard, the 1974 classic, was unable to secure the rights to E.M. Nathanson's novel during the time when it was only an outline prior to its publishing as a book, which would happen in 1965, where it became a bestseller, for which 2 years prior, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer purchased the rights for the project in May 1963. The script was written by Nunnally Johnson, who worked on The Grapes of Wrath, The Woman in the Window, The Gunfighter, The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, which he also directed and produced, Flaming Star, and The World of Henry Orient, and Lucas Heller, who worked as a screenwriter on Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, The Flight of the Phoenix, Monty Walsh, The Deadly Trackers, and Damnation Alley, who decided to implement a rhyme that would be repeated by the 12 actors as a means to remember their roles in the mission. Here's how it goes. 1. Down to the roadblock. We've just begun. 2. The guards are through. 3. The Major's men are on a spree. 4. Major and Władysław go through the door. 5. Pinkley stays out in the drive. 6. The Major gives the rope a fix. 7. Władysław throws the hook to heaven. 8. Jimenez has got a date. 9. The other guys go up the line. 10. Sawyer and Gilpin are in the pen. 11. Posey guards points 5 and 7. 12. Władysław and the Major go down to delve. 13. Franco goes up without being seen. 14. 0 hour. Jimenez cuts the cable, Franco cuts the phone. 15. Franco goes in where the others have been seen. 16. We all come out and it's Halloween. Now, all together now!
1. Down to the roadblock we've just begun.
Showtime.
2. The guards are through.
You're dumping me?
3. The Major's men are on a spree. 4. Major and Władysław go through the door.
Hello, Jerry. May I come in?
5. Pinkley stays out in the drive.
Here he comes.
6. The Major gives the rope a fix.
It's a snake. What do you want me to call it? Hey, rope. What? Hey, grab the rope. Grab the rope.
7. Władysław throws the hook to heaven.
No stairway. Denied.
8. Mayonnaise has got a date.
She'll be all right. Have a date. Come on. Come on. Marion.
Hey, what's this?
It's a date. You eat them.
9. The other guys go up the line.
Hey, Bokeh, I thought you were going up.
10. Sawyer and Gilpin are in the band.
Who do you think you are? I'm a pig. Oink, oink, oink.
11. Posey guards points 5 and 7.
And you've had your 6.
12.
Władysław and the Major go down to delve.
It's dark.
13. Frank goes up without being seen. 14. 0 hour. And mayonnaise cuts the cable. Franco cuts the phone.
And I just cut the cheese.
15. Franco goes in where the others have been.
You know, in the bathroom. Somebody's gonna have to keep an in the bathroom count.
16. We all come out like it's Halloween.
Shut up!
And with that, we move on to the casting. The casting was certainly quite something, because a good chunk of the cast had some big names that actually had a military background, mostly American World War II veterans, including Lee Marvin, Robert Webber, and Robert Bryan, who were enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps, Telly Savalas and George Kennedy, who had been in the U.S. Army, Charles Bronson was in the U.S. Army Air Forces, Ernest Borgnine had been in the Navy, and both Richard Yeakel and Clint Walker were U.S. Merchant Marines. So overall, the film had cast members with military experience, as opposed to the other option, which was the circus. Meanwhile, John Wayne was supposed to be Major Reisman, but because of the adultery found in the original script, which had Reisman in a relationship with an English woman whose husband was fighting overseas, he was like, "No way, Jose." While Jack Palance refused to play Archer Maggot when the writers refused to cut out the racism of said character. So Savalas opted to play the character because he does evil all too well. He can play Blofeld, as we have seen. While 6 of the dozen were experienced stars, the others were mostly those resident in the UK, such as Colin Maitland, who was from England, Canadians Donald Sutherland, who was living in Britain around that time, and Tom Busby, who lived in Scotland, and Americans Stuart Cooper, Al Mancini, and Ben Carruthers, who I'm gonna guess lived in England around that time. According to the audio commentary found on the DVD, Trini Lopez left the film early, for whatever reason, I don't know. So instead of Jimenez blowing himself up like in the original script, to cover up his absence, Jimenez is said to have died off-screen during the parachute drop that starts the mission. Milo Vladik, Tom Busby's character, was then supposed to blow himself up at the tower, but Glenn Gilpin, Ben Carruthers' character, ended up taking on the duty to blow up the radio tower, while Vladik ended up getting shot in front of the chateau. Clint Walker was to give an impression of the general scene, but felt this was demeaning to his character, who was a Native American. So Robert Aldrich chose Vernon L. Pinkley, Sutherland's character, instead. And when it came to the late great Jim Brown, who was the running back for the Cleveland Browns, he announced his retirement from American football at 30 years old during the making of the film, as the owner of the Browns at the time, Art Modell, demanded that Brown choose between continuing to play football or get into the acting business. Brown, having achieved many sports accomplishments, including becoming the NFL's all-time leading rusher, being well ahead statistically of the second leading rusher, and helping the Browns win the 1964 NFL championship, decided that acting was the best path to choose. In Spike Lee's 2002 documentary, Jim Brown, All-American, Modell admitted that making Brown choose between football and Hollywood was a gigantic mistake, and that if he had to do a redo, that demand would never have been made. Modell charged Brown over $100 a day in fines, a fine which Brown said wouldn't even get the team donuts. Although it maybe could have gotten them pizza.
Sorry, everybody. Had a snack before school.
Pizza at 8 o'clock in the morning? What are you?
Anyway, let's get to the shooting. The filming of The Dirty Dozen was done in the United Kingdom during the summer of 1966, with the interiors and set pieces being shot at MGM British Studios, a studio where films like Ivanhoe, Knights of the Round Table, Anastasia, Village of the Damned, and the sequel Children of the Damned, Murder, She Said, The Haunting, The Americanization of Emily, A Shot in the Dark, The Hill, Quatermass in the Pit, The Fearless Vampire Killers, Where Eagles Dare, Dark of the Sun, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Goodbye Mr. Chips were filmed in Borehamwood, which is also where Elstree Studios is located. The chateau, meanwhile, was constructed under the guidance of art director William Hutchinson, and it was designed to be 720 yards, 660 meters, wide, and 50 feet, 15 meters, high, surrounded by 5,400 square yards, 4,500 meters squared, of heather, 400 ferns, 450 shrubs, 30 spruce trees, and 6 weeping willows, for which the construction of the faux chateau proved to be a hurdle. The script pretty much required it to blow up, but the thing was so solid that it would have needed over 70 tons of explosives to ensure that the thing would explode so hard that Michael Bay would come from just seeing it in action. And supposedly they decided to use a cork and plastic selection instead for the chateau's demolition. For the exteriors, they were filmed throughout southeast England, with the credit scenes at the American military prison, which is alluded to the Shepton Mallet, which up until 2013 was the UK's oldest operating prison following the closure of HMP Lancaster Castle in 2011, being filmed in a courtyard at Ashridge House in Hertfordshire, of which the Ashridge estate has served as a filming location for certain films due to its natural beauty, with Ashridge Commons serving as a filming location for films like Sleepy Hollow and Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Richard Yeakel once said that during the introductory lineup scene, which was the first shot, Robert Aldrich, who was something of a prankster, initially had Charles Bronson, who was 5 foot 8 inches, or 1.7 meters, right between Clint Walker, who was 6 foot 6, or 1.98 meters, and Donald Sutherland, who was 6 foot 4, or 1.93 meters, which caused Bronson to get angry, and Aldrich to laugh hysterically. Other scenes, like the jump school scene, were filmed at the former entrance to RAF Hendon in London. The war game was filmed in and around the village of Aldbury, which was a filming location for the Walter Matthau spy comedy Hopscotch. The War Games' headquarters was filmed at Bradenham Manor, and Beechwood Park School in Marquette also served as a filming location during the school's summer term, where the training camp and tower were constructed and filmed on the grounds and in the village itself as parts of Devonshire, as well as using the main house as a military hospital. Following the filming's wrap-up, the training camps were moved and were utilized as sports equipment storage for the school's playing fields, which made the residents of Shenese, Buckinghamshire, none too happy, expressing their discontent to MGM when filming caused destruction around their village. During filming, some of the cast gave interviews to ABC Film Review, where they contrasted their film roles with their wartime experiences, with George Kennedy mentioning how it took him 2 years for him to make Private First Class. Lee Marvin noted that he never made Major in the Marines, and Ernest Borgnine said that he was beneath the Navy, and Marvin just wondered how the generals were while he and everyone else survived. And one last thing to mention, heavy rains throughout the summer caused filming delays that lasted several months, leading to $1 million in overruns and bringing the film's final cost to $5 million because summer rains are very unpredictable. Just ask Francis Ford Coppola. Hurricanes destroy the sets of Apocalypse Now. it didn't help that part of the chateau burned down prematurely during the early hours of September 21st, 1966, as nighttime filming had paused at 3:30 because of fog, and the set, which had been meant for destruction during filming, caught fire at 6:29, so that wasn't good.
Summer rains, you can never predict them.
Principal photography soon finished up at MGM British Studios in September 1966, with post-production to be finished at the regular MGM studio in Culver City, California. And with that, let's get to my thoughts on the film. The Dirty Dozen is one of those movies I watched a lot when I was a teenager, as the copy I just showed you was one I found at a Big Lots one day, of which it no longer exists because it moved to where an old JCPenney once stood, but closed because a lot of the Big Lots stores in this part of California have shut down. And the reason for watching it so much is quite clear. It's a great movie, and one of the best war movies in existence, and one that every time I revisit, I enjoy it just as much as the last. Part of why the movie works is the build-up, as the movie shows Reisman training the Dozen to become the premier team of soldiers to take out some Nazi scum and possibly get a pardon if they get out alive. It shows each soldier's transformation in various interesting ways, with some growing to appreciate Reisman, and some showing a good degree of maturity, with the exception of Maggot, but I'll get to that later. And throughout, you get a vivid portrait of who these guys are and would be if they make it out alive, and it is fun watching them try to work together to overcome the odds and ensure that Reisman's head doesn't get placed on a lance. And then, when the mission starts, all hell breaks loose. And it doesn't matter whether you like or dislike any of the characters in the film, if they die, they're dead. Game over. Not to mention, it's filled with action. With well-crafted explosions, plenty of guns being fired, and a lot of tension throughout, especially when the mission almost fails because a certain character let his lust get the better of him. It really works due to how the pacing is handled, going from each scene without skimping on the details, yet never staying on for too long and becoming boring. Because once you get to the climax, that's where everything pays off after seeing it all play out. Moving to the acting, you've got a cast to beat all casts here. Starting with Lee Marvin as Major John Reisman, the man in charge with making the Dirty Dozen what they are intended to be, and the one to lead them into action. Marvin is captivating as Reisman, being stern and gruff, and with his commanding voice, you buy it that Marvin is the Major, and he means business, and you better get your ass into shape or else. At the same time, Reisman also has a heart, as when the Dozen become the soldiers that he was ordered to make them as, he shows his gratitude by rewarding them, minus Maggot, with prostitutes, obviously taking the Cotton Hill method of rewarding one's achievements.
Hank, you won the big game. So, I'm buying you and your friends hookers. Now go on, boy, pick yourself out a live one.
Marvin is fantastic here as Reisman, and both he and Toshiro Hitsugaya are two guys with white hair that have the cool factor down to a T. Moving from him, you have Charles Bronson as Joseph Władysław, the ninth of the Dozen, who is set to be executed for killing his superior over an order he wouldn't follow, who is given a second chance at life when he is selected for Project Amnesty. This was certainly a different period of time for Bronson in his career, because while his career early on had him show up in classics like The Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape, and Once Upon a Time in the West, Others will be more familiar with his career following Death Wish, which made him very successful in the US, where previously it was Europe where he was the most popular. Especially since the Cannon Group had a firm hold on him during the 1980s, whether it be with Death Wish sequels, 10 to Midnight, Murphy's Law, Assassination, Messenger of Death, or Kinshite Forbidden Subjects, making his career certainly more interesting depending on who you ask. For me, I always knew Bronson for the Dirty Dozen and the Magnificent Seven long before I ever watched Death Wish or its sequels. And here, he's fantastic as Wladislaw, who gives off the cool and collected vibe quite masterfully, reminding me a bit of Napoleon Wilson from Assault on Precinct 13, and is one of the best characters of the dozen, not to mention the only one who actually makes it out alive. Then you also have John Cassavetes as Victor R. Franco, a mob-associated robber who doesn't take the idea of being a prisoner turned soldier very well at first, before eventually coming together with the program and eventually learning to respect Reisman and being one hell of a soldier for the Major. Cassavetes was something of a renaissance, often writing, directing, self-financing, producing, and even distributing his own films and helping to pioneer American independent cinema, while also appearing in films like Edge of the City and Rosemary's Baby. And in The Dirty Dozen, he makes the most of his character in this film. At times hard-edged, other times charismatic, Cassavetes more than earns his due here as Franco, and it's easy to see why he got an Oscar nomination for his role in the movie. And then there's Telly Savalas as Archer Maggot, the religious zealot and demented rapist, who of all the prisoners that seemed likely to murder Reisman if given the opportunity, would have taken it if need be. Savalas always had a knack for playing all types of characters, whether it be Theo Kojak, or as I mentioned, Ernst Stavro Blofeld in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And in this film, he's a disgusting and horrible individual that, at any second, could very well cause a whole mission to go awry, which it does. And the way you know that Reisman doesn't trust Maggot is that when the rest of the dozen is allowed to have hookers, and Maggot doesn't get any because he's a psycho. And he most certainly gets killed by one of the dozen, in this case, Jefferson. Savalas is mesmerizing as Maggot, capturing the crazy, maniacal nature to a T. And when Maggot gets what he deserves, he gets it. There are also great performances from Ernest Borgnine as Major General Sam Warden, Reisman's superior who gives him the order of putting the group together, Jim Brown as Robert T. Jefferson, ensuring his future in cinema, whether it be in films like this or the multitude of blaxploitation films released in the 1970s, by playing a black soldier who most likely was the victim of racism leading to his incarceration, Richard Yekel as Sergeant Clyde Boren, Reisman's assistant in this endeavor, as well as Jimenez's replacement after dying during the parachute drop, George Kennedy as Major Max Armbruster, a friend of Reisman's who monitors the war game.
Well, I'm just an observer, Captain, not an umpire. I can't interfere or make any rulings.
Trini Lopez as Pedro Jimenez, the soldier that dies during the parachute drop because Lopez left early, Ralph Meeker as Captain Stuart Kinder, one of the soldiers who psychoanalyzes the dozen and tells Reisman that 7 of them would try to kill him if given the window of opportunity, Maggot especially. Robert Ryan as Colonel Everett Dasher Breed, Reisman's nemesis who attempts to get the ADSEC to pull the plug on the operation. Donald Sutherland as Vernon L. Pinkley, the rather ditzy member of the dozen and the most significant role for the actor at that point. Clint Walker as Samson Posey, the mild-mannered member of the dozen, who you better not get on the bad side of. Robert Webber as Brigadier General Denton, Tom Busby as Milo Vladik, Ben Carruthers as Glenn Gilpin, Stuart Cooper as Roscoe Lever, Colin Maitland as Seth K. Sawyer, and Al Mancini as Passos are Bravos. Meaning overall, you've got one mother of an ensemble, and everybody is giving great performances all around. The film is also well shot, with each shot being meticulously placed and having a dynamic quality to each shot. Even getting creative during the scene of Jefferson throwing grenades into one of the holes where the Nazis are hiding in the basements, showing a lot of realism of how the war was at that time. It's quality stuff, and considering the cinematographer, Edward Scaife, also shot Night of the Demon and Khartoum, you can tell that Robert Aldrich picked a good one to shoot the movie. And lastly, the film's score is pretty good, being composed by Frank DeVol, who worked with Aldrich on Kiss Me Deadly, The Big Knife, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte, and The Longest Yard, plus also did music for films like Pillow Talk, Love or Come Back, McClintock, Capaloo, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and even did music for The Brady Bunch. DeVol's score for The Dirty Dozen is top-notch, with plenty of horns and other orchestral pieces showing up throughout, and capturing the military vibe of everything quite well. Feeling kind of like a Jerry Goldsmith score at times. It works quite well, and enhances the feel of the film to the point where I haven't even forgotten it, in between all the action and performances. Overall, The Dirty Dozen is superb, and a war film that is worth going down to delve into. Just make sure you take a shower afterwards, and maybe get a shave in. You might come out smelling rather funky after that. The Dirty Dozen hit theaters on June 15, 1967, where it grossed $45.3 million on a budget of $5.4 million, becoming MGM's highest grossing movie of the year and the fourth highest grossing film of 1967, just behind Bonnie and Clyde, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and The Graduate, and getting some positive reviews, albeit some criticizing the violence in the film, as some of those people weren't ready for that yet. The movie even got 3 Oscar nominations, including Best Supporting Actor for John Cassavetes, losing to his co-star George Kennedy for his role in Cool Hand Luke, Best Film Editing for Michael Luciano, losing to Hal Ashby for In the Heat of the Night, and Best Sound, losing to In the Heat of the Night, and winning an Oscar for Best Sound Effects. In 2001, AFI placed the film at number 65 on their list of 100 Years, 100 Thrills, and has spawned everything from a parody film in the Philippines, similarly structured films like Too Late the Hero from director Robert Aldrich, which was described as a pseudo-sequel to The Dirty Dozen, the Michael Caine-led 1969 war film Play Dirty, and The Inglourious Basterds from Enzo G. Castellari, the latter of which gave Quentin Tarantino the title for his Inglourious Basterds. Not to mention, most of the surviving cast members of the film supply their voices to the commando elite in Small Soldiers. There was a comic book adaptation from Dell Comics. Marvel Comics launched Combat Kelly and the Deadly Dozen as a spin-off of Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos in honor of the Dirty Dozen. And in the 1980s, DC Comics revived their Silver Age comic team, the Suicide Squad, with a similar premise, just with supervillains instead of military convicts. And considering how popular they are, they owe a lot of gratitude to the Dirty Dozen. There was even a series of made-for-TV sequels to the film, with the first sequel, Next Mission, having Lee Marvin return as Major John Reisman, and the latter two, The Deadly Mission and The Fatal Mission, featuring Telly Savalas as Major Wright, who is the opposite of Archer Maggot in the original film. And in all of these, Ernest Borgnine is the only cast member to reprise his role as General Ward. There's also been talk of a remake potentially, so overall, The Dirty Dozen had quite an impact. And even after all of that, people still remember it, so that's pretty cool. The Dirty Dozen is a great movie, and one of the most fantastic films of really 1967. And it's a film that I highly recommend that you check out. Whether you decide to pick it up on DVD here, or you decide to pick it up on Blu-ray, it's a film that you really should check out because it is one of the best World War II movies, one of the best war movies in general. It's just a great movie all around. It's got great production design, the cinematography is fantastic, it's action-packed, always moving at a steady pace. The characters are very memorable, with characters you like and characters you love to hate. There's great performances all around. Overall, it's just a great movie that is definitely worth watching. And really, a lot of the films that I do talk about on this channel, they're definitely worth watching. Unless I say they're not. In that case, they're not. But that's for later. And so with that, this concludes my review of The Dirty Dozen. I hope you enjoyed it, found it entertaining, educational, and made you want to seek out this movie. Because, like I said, purpose of this whole thing. And while you're here, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell for notifications, share it around with all your friends and family members. Just spread the word. Because this is stuff you don't want to miss. Unless you deliberately choose to miss it. In that case, okay, whatever. Anyway, so with that, I will catch you later. You take care, okay?
Donald Duck?
Donald Duck's down at the crossroads with a machine gun.
He'd better not be asleep or we'll all be in trouble, huh?